It took me a while to figure out what it meant.
Is that not it's by date the newest, right? Well, go up a little. Can you go up a little more? Sure. I mean, is it? Oh, you can't. Oh,
I'd like to call the meeting to order for the January 17th legislative session, number 2017-02. Those who'd like to stand and join us in the Lord's Prayer and Pledge of Allegiance, please do.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I entertain a motion from the council to approve the legislative minutes from January 3rd, 2017.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Minutes are approved. Entertain a motion to approve the open work session minutes from December 20th, reference to East Wicomico Little League.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any corrections, discussions?
Yeah, just one. At the very end there, it mentions that I asked if the president was still Phil. I would like to include his last name for the record, Phil Malta, M-A-L-T-A.
Okay.
Any other corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor of the open work session minutes as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Work session minutes approved. Entertain a motion to approve the work session minutes from December 20th in reference to Barron Creek.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Minutes are approved. At this time, I'd like to entertain a motion from council to adjourn as the county council so that we can reconvene as the Urban Services Commission.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Meeting's adjourned. We now are convened as the Urban Services Commission. Entertain a motion to approve the minutes from January 3rd, 2017.
So moved.
Second.
Any corrections? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Minutes are approved. Entertain a motion to adjourn from the Urban Services Commission so that we can reconvene in legislative session at the Wicomico County Council.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. We're now reconvened. Mrs. Hurley, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. President, County Council members, ladies and gentlemen. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our new Executive Office Associate. This is Kim Crispino. Kim, welcome aboard, and we're excited to have you working in the council office.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the first item on the agenda this morning is a public hearing on the capital improvement program for the period of July 1st, 2017 through June 30th, 2022, and the capital budget for fiscal year 18.
This time, we open the floor for the public hearing. If you have any comments you'd like to make on any particular item in the public hearing, go to the podium, state your name and your concern. Mrs. Hurley will read off each department at a time. It'll go quickly. And when she reads off that particular department or that particular section, that's when you would come to the podium and make your comments. Thank you, Mrs. Hurley.
Okay. I also like to mention that in accordance with Section 704F of the Wicomico County Charter, a public notice was advertised in the Daily Times stating that a public hearing would be held today at 10 a.m. and that any member of the public or their representative, the county executive, and the head of any department or agency of the county shall be entitled to be heard at the public hearing. I'll start with category for general services. Next is Warwick Community College. The Sheriff's Office. Emergency Services. Corrections. Health Department, Elections, Wicomico Public Library, Circuit Court, Old Courthouse, Clerk of the Court, Public Works, including roads and solid waste, Recreation, Parks, and Tourism. Airport. And last is the Board of Education.
Okay, seeing none, that does conclude the public hearing. What's next on the agenda as far as the CIP is concerned?
We can either do another work session, or we can schedule it for adoption.
Okay, all right, thank you. Second item on the agenda.
I'm sorry, the second item on the agenda for today is Resolution 03, 2017, to authorize the county executive to execute on behalf of Wicomico County, Maryland, a joint use agreement with East Wicomico Little League. A public notice was advertised in the Daily Times stating that a public hearing will be held today at 10 a.m., and if anyone is interested to provide their comments.
This time, we open the floor for a public hearing on Resolution 03, 2017. If you have any comments that you'd like to make, come to the podium, state your name and your concerns. Not getting a lot of takers on these public hearings today. Seeing none, that concludes the public hearing. Entertain a motion from council to approve Resolution 03, 2017.
So moved.
Second? Second. Does council have any questions? I know Mr. Steve Miller is here. Any questions from Mr. Miller? Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor of Resolution 03, 2017, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Resolution passes.
Okay, next for council's consideration is Resolution Number 04, 2017, to endorse a loan from the Department of Commerce under the Maryland Economic Development Assistance Authority and Fund to Torrid P&H LLC, as well as to endorse a loan in the amount of $10,000 as a match to the MEDAC loan. Torrid P&H is a cable harness company that intends to establish business operations in Wicomico County at the location of 2203 Northwood Drive in Salisbury, Maryland. And Mr. Dave Ryan is here if you guys have any questions.
Thank you, Dave. And I know Katarina Enerfeld is here with Toroid. If you guys wouldn't mind, we'd appreciate if you could come forward. The county's actually getting the best part of this deal because it's only a 10%, and what you've gone through and actually what it represents is pretty good for Wicomico County.
Thank you, Mr. President, for having us today, and I want to welcome Katarina Enerfeld and Rich Bishop from Toroid P&H with us today. As you know, the Maryland Economic Development and Assistance Fund requires a 10% statutory match to any participation from the state. And as Mr. Joe Holloway pointed out last time, we established a loan fund at Salisbury Wicomico Economic Development to meet that match over a period of time. So we're happy to be here today. It looks like we're talking about 50 new manufacturing jobs for Wicomico County as a result of these individuals beside me. No strangers to Wicomico County. We have a long history of manufacturing with different entities here, and I'm going to turn it over to Katarina to let her, if we may, describe her business interest here and what the future looks like with this particular operation.
Certainly.
So,
Good morning.
Good morning. First of all, I want to say thank you. Thank you for seeing us here. And Torrid Corporation, which is the mother company, has been in operation 35 years next year. So in Maryland, manufacturing in Maryland. And we realized at a point about 2 years ago, at the same time as Labanol was letting us know of their plans to move from the area, we realized that there's a whole workforce out there who knows a lot, that has a know-how and experience. We also realized that what was utilized in the manufacturing at Labanol is very similar to what we're doing at Toroid today. It's a very manual operation. It's based on people on long term to get to know. We say that at Toroid it takes about 2 years to train a machine operator. And we realized that the situation is very close to what was going on at Labanol. So we decided to approach our existing customer base for harnessing and for panel assemblies. We hired Rich Bishop, who's been with Labanol how many years?
Well, Labanol 5 years, but previous to that with Harvard Custom Manufacturing, and previous to that was Grumman Aerospace. So I've been here for a long time.
There's a resume.
So with the help from the county and from the state, we have opened up a new facility. The exact address is
2300 Northwood Drive.
Okay.
We
It's the
leased-
back part of K&L.
Yeah, we
Okay.
leased 10,000 square foot at K&L and have started. You're very welcome to come and visit. We have it set up and ready for manufacturing, and we're waiting right now for our first contracts. And we're starting out approaching Toroid's customers. We also know that there are opportunities, and we're in discussions with GE and Siemens regarding harnessing for wind turbines on land. We don't need to make a decision offshore or not, but we're talking about wind turbines in general, major harnessing. And then, of course, we will entertain other opportunities that is coming along with this. So I want to thank you. I know that what we've been doing over the years with Toroid, you also know about Arcon welding equipment, and also now Arcon welding training services.
We may not know all the details on the Archon Welding Training Services, so you should let us know that too.
Okay,
Because
Arcon.
you spearheaded that.
Yes, Arcon Welding Training Center is, or Services Training Center is, it's a state-funded program to give opportunities for welders to get a basic knowledge about welding, be able to go into local jobs. Today we have an 84% placement rate. And most of these gentlemen and women going through the training program are today working at Chesapeake Shipbuilding. They're working at Delaware Elevator. They have job offers from Exelon, Crystal Steel, other local companies. So the goal with this training center is basically to give people an opportunity to train for a trade and a skill that is giving a livable wage. It's been funded, the startup was funding through MEA, Maryland Energy Administration, and after that we have received EARN funding through the state. So we're just waiting for the next 2 years of funding. I think it's coming through.
And also, Mr. President, the Regional Manufacturing Institute of Maryland just recently recognized Katerina and Toroid Corporation for that welding services center, as well as an inclusionary workforce with Toroid Archon welding equipment and the training center. So I want to congratulate you on that.
Very good.
That was a surprise. I wasn't going to do that today.
Thank you.
Any questions from council members?
I don't have a question. I
Yes.
just have a comment. And I'd like to thank you very much for keeping the business in Wicomico County. It's very important to see us grow, and I know you're very dedicated to trying to keep the workforce here in Wicomico County, and I think we certainly appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Dave and myself had a conversation the other day about, we're losing Labanol, and that was a major employer, but we're picking up some smaller companies, and, you know, it's less of an impact if something happens when we have smaller companies, so we appreciate you staying here, we really do, and hope you get big.
Yeah, we do
It's a
too.
long way.
Weird, right?
That's the goal.
Yeah, keep growing. We
Thank you
appreciate
for
it.
saying that, because that's an important part of this transition, and creating new opportunities for new companies with that skilled workforce that we have in the area.
A little diversification
Yes, sir.
and all that along with it.
Thank you for saying that.
Councilor Davis?
Will they be in competition with the company that the Bernsteins are doing?
We don't know what the future will hold, but I think they're both starting out in different niche markets.
We are. I know that. And also, if we look at it, Labanol is was a humongous company for this area, humongous big business, and we're small. I mean, I think there is plenty of opportunities with lots of small companies, and that's how we normally do it here on the shore.
Sure. Any other questions? All those in favor of Resolution 04, 2017, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Resolution passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have resolution number 05, 2017, an appropriation of funds to the Department of Recreation, Parks, and Tourism from unanticipated revenue in the amount of $10,200.20. The Department of Recreation, Parks, and Tourism has received $5,925.20 from Salisbury Scrap Metal for recycling old metal bleachers at the Arthur W. Purdue Stadium, and $4,275 from Seventh Inning Stretch LP for selling old seats at the stadium. And we have Mr. Steve Miller here if there's any questions.
Okay. Entertain a motion to approve Resolution 05, 2017.
So moved.
Second. Discussion?
I mean, could we get an explanation of?
Certainly. Steve? Good morning.
Good morning.
Let everybody know.
I thought you might ask that question. So these, as you know, as part of the renovation, we've already removed seats, but we're going to be installing new seats at the stadium. So this money was unanticipated, and it wasn't embedded in our budget. So it was as Laura mentioned, the recycling money and selling the old seats. So the new seats are scheduled to be installed February 1 to begin that install. But what we'd like to do is to take that revenue, put it towards the project, and continue to use it towards the stadium improvements.
So is it earmarked for anything in particular, or?
No, it's part of the overall project, but it wasn't budgeted in that way, so we thought it'd be appropriate to come to council.
Why did Seventh Inning Stretch sell the seats and not the county?
Just because of convenience with it being there, they were able to manage that inventory, and they kept track of all the inventory and who they sold to.
Right.
It was just a convenience for us.
Did they take a cut, or did we get
No,
the full?
no, we got
Okay.
the full. Yep.
Good question. Yes, sir. Hey, which phase are we in?
We're in between phase 2 and 3. By the end of this season, we'll have completed phase 2, majority of phase 2, and then the seats and the video board are in phase 3. So next off season, we'll be in the final phase.
Are there seats going around the, like home run fence?
That would be for next year.
That'd
That
be
won't
phase
happen
3.
this off season. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of Resolution 05, 2017, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Resolution passes. Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Steve.
That is all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Hurley. Good morning, Mr. Roser.
Good morning, Mr. President, council members. Excuse me. I call your attention to a report dated 12/13/2016. It is an electronics recycling review. This was not a formal audit. It was a consult project. Recycling of electronics includes 3 types: TVs and monitors, computers and processors, and everything else, all other electronics. The county overall must pay for disposal of these products. It costs approximately $6,000 per tractor trailer load to dispose of these materials. According to management, they send 6 to 8 a year. That translates to $36,000 to $48,000 a year to dispose of these electronics. That's the bad news. The good news is all the tonnage associated with that counts toward our exclusion that the MDE requires the landfill to adhere to, so that we get credit for some very heavy material as far as that goes. Currently, the city is working with the county to develop an equitable plan to dispose of these products within city limits. We did notice a problem at the time of the audit with accumulated goods. There were several loads sitting ready to be delivered. We also interviewed some local retailers, both management and myself. We were curious to see what they did. We have some retailers who sell these types of products, especially large screen TVs, and offer a service of disposing of the old one when they bring new ones in. We found that they have a tendency to use their own vendors, so we suggested to management that they may want to look at who these vendors are that our local retailers are using, and also maybe we could devise a way to exclude the tonnage that they take in within the county for the purposes of our exclusion with MDE. We also noticed a couple of issues with our current vendor, and we understand that management is looking for a new one, and we have scheduled a 90-day follow-up on some of these issues. And I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have. Also, Mr. Young is here, has also agreed to answer any questions.
Entertain a motion to approve Resolution 06, 2017.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Discussion. Questions?
Well, I don't have a question, but recycling has changed in the past few years. I was noticing the checks we got for those seats was 7 or 8 years ago, it had probably been 4 times that much.
That's a problem, for
Yeah.
sure.
And
Yeah.
so that's one reason we're having to pay. At some point in time, some of this stuff may become a commodity, and we have get some income out of it. But as it is right now, I think the whole marketplace is depressed when it comes to recyclables. So.
That, according to management, that's true, yes.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of Resolution 06, 2017, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried, resolution passes. This time we open the floor for public comments. If anybody would like to have any public comments, come to the podium, please. State your name and your concern. Seeing none, that concludes public comments. Council comments.
Oh, I've got one. I want to wish a happy birthday to Wicomico County. We're at our 150th anniversary. History of Wicomico County is kind of interesting. I don't know if anybody follows it real close or not, but Wicomico was spun off from Worcester and Somerset in 1867. There's numerous reasons why that was done. In my reading, I found out one of the reasons was people got tired of the travel time to either go to Berlin or to Princess Anne, or Snow Hill or Princess Anne. And the other reason, some of the legislators thought they would boost their party's numbers if they had an extra county to get some delegates out of. So that was another reason. So I understand the county executive may be putting together some festivities for later in the year. Is that correct, Bob? And if anybody wants to get involved, contact the county executive's office or the county council office. I don't think there's anything set in stone yet, but history of Wicomico County is pretty interesting if people follow it. There's some books out there, and so just happy birthday to Wicomico. Thank you.
I think that birthday's in August, though.
Yeah, well, it's this year anyway.
Yeah.
Joe, I liked your history lesson on Rock Walking Road.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Yeah, there's some different stories on that one.
It's okay. Is that for another time?
Yeah, that's for another day, yeah.
Any other comments? Under presidential comments, we attended, I know that the executive and the council members attended the Martin Luther King dinner last night at the Civic Center. It's always a really great event. It's a lot of people, and Weston, I know you were there as well. A lot of people there. It's always a very good event, a lot of good speakers. Councilman Davis represented the council with a proclamation. I'd like to thank him for that. He did an excellent job. But I'd also like to thank Jesse Ballard and his committee for putting this together, and the people that put it together every year, because it's no small event, and it's very worthwhile in its purpose. That being said, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn so that we can go into open work sessions followed by closed work session.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Meeting is adjourned. First item on the open work session is the fiscal year 2016 audit. I know that we have Mr. Mike Klager and Ms. Ashley Stern here from Pig Crawl and Stern. Good morning. Those seats may come up, Mike. It looks like,
That's better.
It might not stay there, though.
Okay. Somebody else share. Well, thank you for inviting us back this morning. I know basically at the last meeting, there were several items of communications and so forth that we had issued where there was not a whole lot of time for council input or review and questions, and I guess that's kind of the part of the purpose of our here today. So I guess with that, I'm not sure if you guys want to start off with questions directly to us, or we can kind of go over some things which we were asked in advance. However
if you would begin,
Okay.
that'd
All
be
right.
fine.
Ashley, want to start off on that?
Yeah. So I believe everyone has received in their brief book quite a few documentations. I'll kind of go through each of them. I'm not sure which order you got them in, but I'll reference where I'm at. One of the things we kind of wanted to start with is just to kind of a general conversation about the audit process. I know we have new council members, old council members that haven't actually had to put up with my explanation of the audit process, so I figured I'd go through it. One of the main goal of an external financial statement audit is to express an opinion on the financial statements that they're free from material misstatement. There's inherent limitations that exist when providing such opinion, such as different estimates within the financial statements, as well as a few other items that just cannot be eliminated. I provided an article within the brief book kind of about the audit process. If you have any questions about the article, let me know, but it kind of goes into depth about different phases of the audit process as well. One of the things that we're constantly asked about is fraud, as if the audit is designed to detect all fraud. It's not. Management is responsible for preventing and detecting fraud, as well as designing internal controls, and the audit is not designed to detect fraud. However, we're responsible for the assurance that the financials aren't materially misstated due to fraud. Just something I'm always questioned about. And I've mentioned this a few times, but a material misstatement. So what is a material misstatement? Materiality is a number that I'm sure a lot of us use in different day-to-day activities, but according to the auditing standards, it's a specific calculation which is set that we do on each fund. So every fund that you see presented in your financial statements, we do a specific calculation to determine what would be a material misstatement. There was also a chart within the brief book to kind of go over the differences between internal auditing and external auditing. I know you're very familiar with internal auditing with Steve Roser, but I wanted to go over a few of the key differences. Both are risk-based, so we each look at the risks of the county and determine our audit plans based upon those risks. A few key differences is internal auditing is meant to advise management on the internal control system, as you've seen Steve do many times. And the external auditing is designed to provide an opinion on the financial statements. Internal auditing covers all areas of the organization, whereas the external audit has a specific financial focus. Also within the brief packet, I put a copy of the MD&A. You also have it in the financial statements as well. It's that front section of the financial statements. I wanted to go over a couple clarifications of items to go with the MD&A, and if you have any questions, feel free to just stop me. The MD&A is written by management, and our responsibility is described on page 2 of the financial statements. I didn't want to go ahead and read that to you. Limited procedures are applied. One of the comments in the MD&A on page 6 we mentioned was that there was an $8.3 million increase in net position. This is that government-wide increase that we went over. Governmental activities actually saw a decrease of $1.8 million. I can reference page 21 of the financial statements if you're looking in those. Whereas business-type activities or enterprise funds, proprietary funds, saw a $10 million increase. I know we went over quite a few of the increases of the enterprise funds, but just to mention them again, Airport saw a $2.9 million increase in their net position, and that's due to grants for construction. You'll see the depreciation expense later when everything's been implemented. Solid Waste saw a $1.4 million increase in their net position, and that's due to vastly reduced expenses and increased income. And Urban Services was another large note of a $6 million increase, and that's mainly due to the transfer of that Morris Mill property over to Urban Services from the grants fund, which the billing will occur. You'll see that expense when it's donated or transferred to the city of Fruitland. But that'll be in the future. One of the questions kind of posed with this section is the sustainability. Is this increase, $8.3 million, going to be expected every year? really can't see the future. We don't know what's going to happen. However, to the best of our abilities, you're not going to see another $6 million increase in urban services. The Morris Mill transfer was a one-time thing. And in the future, you'll see the depreciation from the airport construction. So that $2.9 million won't be coming in, but you'll have the construction expenses. Also on page 6, we made a note about the income tax revenues, which are $7.4 million over budget from last year, whereas total revenue actually increased $2.2 million in 2015, or from 2015. I wanted to make that clarification that the $7.4 million was over budget, whereas the 2.2 is an increase from prior year. There was also an increase in the property taxes from year to year. That's not as noted in the MD&A, due to the change in the provision of uncollectible accounts. That is netted within that revenue section of the personal property or the real estate taxes. There was another question posed to us about the real estate property tax collections and the effect of the tax sale on the collections. I think Leslie can better answer that, as many of those collections occurred after 2016 and the effects of the tax sale was still being felt in 2017. If you'd like her to come up and speak on it, I can.
Could you explain the 7.4 and 2.2 again?
Yep. So the 7.4 that we reference, or that is referenced on page 6, it's in that third bullet point. There's a $7.4 million increase in income tax revenue over what was budgeted. So the 2016 budget versus what actually came in the income taxes for that revenue. The 2.2 is just actually revenue increase over the previous year. There was a revenue increase of $2.2 million over actual 2015 and actual 2016. That can be shown at the bottom of page 6.
So we had projected
Conservative budget, basically. Yeah.
a lot less.
Right.
Than the 2.2, a lot less.
And a lot of that had to do with the Wynn case, not knowing what the refunds were going to be, the effects of that, as well as not knowing what the economy was going to do in the income tax revenue.
That's a difficult line item to budget on an annual basis. It's not like property tax where you know the assessable rate and the rate. You can come up with a number. So you're typically going to be fairly conservative on an income tax revenue budget item.
Okay.
So,
I believe we've typically seen that as coming in higher than budget, unless it's been a surprise.
It's always a good thing.
yes.
Did you have a question, Mark?
I'm not gonna wait.
Okay.
One of the other items that Mark went over in the previous presentation was the pension. I provided within the council packet your two pension reports. I don't want to go over them in detail. Specific questions about the estimates and the projections, I think your actuary is better to answer those because they're the ones who do the calculation. But I wanted to go over the plans in general. You have the county is participating in the county plan, which is the current active plan, as well as the old Maryland State Retirement and Pension System plan, which there's employees still remaining in that from Rec and Parks as well as the Roads Division. That report comes from the state of Maryland. There's a required contribution annually, but other than that, the county really has no effect on that liability calculation.
Can I ask you, on page 7 of your report, page 8 of our PDF file,
Yep.
why the new revenue, where it says excluding transfers, why is the new revenue growth so low compared to all the prior years?
Sorry.
I'm looking at dollar change year over year.
I would refer, yes, it starts on
I
page.
think it's your second page.
Yes, so
Okay.
page 7, but it refers back to page 6. So I would refer back to somewhat on page 6 where you can see the trend of the actual dollar numbers. I'm not a big percentage person, but for previous years, especially, and I'll kind of start back at the beginning, from 2012 to 2013, you saw a real increase in your personal property tax of about $1 million. You saw about over $1 million in real property taxes increase, as well as a almost $2 million increase in your federal and state grants. That's not always sustained every year. The federal and state grants are pending, whereas in this past year, you saw less than $1 million increase in your federal and state grant. It's really just a collective effort of all the revenues brought together. One of the big changes to probably point out now is that service charge revenue decreased, and that's due to the change in the accounting for roads. Roads used to be an internal service fund and could bill out for service revenue. Now that they're part of the general fund, they're unable to, or not permitted to, bill out for certain revenues. So that's $1.6 million and change, and that could contribute to a lot of the percentage differences. But I can look further into that and get back to you. Exactly.
Could you explain that a little more about, like what could the county build before that they can't now?
So for fuel, that's billed through the roads department, and I believe Weston and Leslie probably can give a little bit more detail, but different services that the roads will perform for other departments, fuel, et cetera, they were able to bill out to each department. It's really an interfund revenue, but
So it's more of an
Internal-
accounting.
yeah,
internal
it's
service
an
funds.
accounting.
Right.
It would, revenue on one side and an expense to the county on the other side. Back to the pension, the two actuary reports are in front of you. One of the things that I wanted to point out is in the Maryland State Retirement Report, the amount that the county has to recognize or is required to recognize as a net pension liability increased by $150,000 last year, and that's no effect. There's nothing the county could do about that. That's all the management of the state retirement fund and what their investments are doing. But that is unfortunately a liability on the county's books. The county's financial report for their pension plan is also included. I wanted to bring forth one specific thing within that plan, and that's on page 10 of the plan. It is the actuary determined contribution versus what the county actually contributed. As you can see, consistently over the past.
Let me interrupt you really quick.
Yeah.
When you say page 10, because some of us are following it on a PDF file and
It's
not.
got 300 pages on that.
Are you
It's
referring
page
to?
52 on the PDF,
Thank you.
when they're numbered on the top.
Which report are you looking at?
The gas
Thank-
station.
Okay, where it says retirement plan?
Yep.
Okay.
One of the things that we're always questioned is, are we contributing as much as we should? The actuary is determining that you should contribute, for example, in 2016, $882,000 according to their calculations, but the county went ahead and contributed 1.4. So the county's even going above what the actual required contribution is to contribute more, and yet the liability is still increasing. And that has to do with the investments, projections of what the investments are going to do versus what they actually do, and also has to do with certain payouts, people living longer, a lot of mortality tables and estimates from that sense. As one of the changes that we noted in the financial statements this year is that the pension expense is being allocated to individual departments related to the pension plans we just discussed. That's typical for a lot of our government clients that we do. There's few that keep it all as one expense, but most will allocate it to all the departments to more accurately show what each department is costing.
However, the footnote disclosures normally will be in total, so you can kind of look at the total expense.
We'll know both, right,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Yes.
So it is disclosed, you just got to find it back in the footnotes.
Okay.
So
Unfortunately, the pension footnote is 20-something
It's 20
pages.
pages long. Yeah.
So it is, but we can make sure to continually point that out. Also in the MD&A, I wanted to continue on page 10 of the MD&A, which is in the front part of your, sorry, Laura, I should have noted the numbers in their file as well. There was an increase in total assets, and that's your actual assets, your fixed assets, your cash, your receivables, for the government-wide activities of about $20.32 million. This is in connection with the increase in the physical assets, other current assets, including cash and receivables, especially with the construction at the airport, the urban services, construction with the Morris Mill, and it also is in connection with that $8.3 million increase in your net position that we mentioned earlier. Also in the MD&A, towards back on page 15, or excuse me, page 16 of the MD&A, we talk
All
about.
right, when you say page 16, you're referencing the number at the very bottom, am I correct?
Yes, sorry about
I'll
that.
make sure everybody's on the same page. That's 17 on the PDF, is that correct?
Page 16, I believe, is page 11 on the PDF. Well, 11 on the top printed corner.
Yes.
Okay.
11 on the top, okay.
I don't have
Does
electronic.
does everybody know where we are? Okay.
Lots of pages.
Yeah, we'll have to kind of coordinate this at some point. Thanks.
We mentioned fiduciary funds, and this is one of the things that we get asked about a lot. A fiduciary fund is money that's not the county's, or a receivable that's not the county's, assets that are not the county's, but the county is in charge of managing. They're basically held in the benefit for others. There's quite a few fiduciary funds that the county is in charge of. I listed a few that I wanted to go over. Was the inmate welfare fund, the pension trust fund, which is used to pay out the benefits of the pension, as well as the narcotics task force. They're also fully listed in your financial statements on page 31 if you're interested in reading each of the fiduciary funds within the county.
Page what, 31?
31. It goes on to 32 a little bit.
How closely do you audit those funds?
We go through each of our, each fund in a whole, because those funds are all listed as one, but we audit their expenses, we look at the cash, but we don't specifically go into each, every single line item.
But
on
we'll
there.
rotate those from year to year. We'll look at different funds, different years, so you're not, concentrating on one fund every year, so.
Yeah.
I thought we had funded 30,000 for coke. Was it 100? The coke program, opioid program for the health department and state's attorney's office. I thought that was a $30,000. I thought that when it came before the council, I thought that we had,
130 total, the city was gonna put in 30, we put in 100.
coke. All right, yeah, I couldn't find it I couldn't find it. Okay. Go ahead, sorry.
No, you're fine. The health insurance and workman's compensation insurance, that's another thing that I noted in the MD&A we wanted to bring before council. We saw a rise in these costs across our clients, especially with the effect of being self-insured, the ACA, and continuing expenses related to that. However, I believe the Human Resource Department can provide you with some specific rates as well as expenses related to it. The last thing I wanted to mention in regards to the management discussion analysis is the other post-employment benefits. It's currently an asset. There's an actuary report also within your packet. The only thing I really wanted to mention about this is that currently the county has a OPEB, or other post-employment benefit asset, of $3.8 million. So we've overfunded or pre-funded. Pre-funded is probably a better term. The benefits related to this.
And that's built up fairly quickly. I mean, about a couple of years ago, it was only a couple $100,000 pre-funded. Now we're up to about 3.8 million as of June 30, 16. So just to let you know where that balance stands at this point. It's kind of the opposite direction of the pension. Those are liabilities. These are actually prepayments, prepaid assets, if you will.
Okay.
One of the questions posed to us has to do with differences between cutbacks of staff, changes in staff, as well as the internal control effect on that. There's an inherent increase in the risk when changing staff or having a cutback in personnel. People are going to retire, people are going to change jobs, and there's going to be a risk related to that. There becomes an efficiency of having the same person work on the same thing because they understand it, they know how to do it, and they do it more correct. So of course, we always increase our risk assessment when we have a change in personnel, and we'll increase our testing due to any changes in personnel. I think the council, in related to these changes in staff, should be continuing to assess the same risk, just like we do with any change in personnel, the understanding that something could occur because of that change in personnel.
So do you see this as a problem for the county?
We see it happen in every government.
It's common, yes.
It's common. It happens all the time. So I don't see it as a county-only problem, but do I always assess it as a risk or a potential problem? Yes, but that's just because of our auditing standards and how I look at things. We can provide some more information on any different internal control structures based upon number of personnel or anything the council would be interested in looking into. One of the items that we provided to council in that packet on, with the presentation was a memo that we used to discuss different, or summarize different items that we discussed during the audit. I like to do this because then I can put everything together. You discuss a lot of things during audit and are in constant communication, but especially with something that takes as much time as the county audit, it's important for me to have this all compiled. A few items in relation to that. The budget transfer noted as in the top column, this was an isolated incident. We only saw this once within our testing, or our testing sample. It may have happened again, it may have not, but we only saw it once.
Do you know what page this is, actually?
Laura, do you happen to have the memo page?
I have to find it real quick.
It'd be on page 1 of the memo, but I should have.
This looks like this. It says memo up there.
Should be page 164, I believe, on the PDF, or 68 on the top right.
It's a two-page document, I believe.
Correct. It's dated December 15th, Madam Clerk. The budget transfer was an isolated incident, and it has since been corrected and been clarified with that department. Another thing is, I tend to use the word impress, thinking that it's an everyday word, and I do understand that it is not. Typically, reconciled balance with any payroll account, we like to see something small. I'm not going to quantify it, that is completely up to management. However, that account should always be reconciled back to that amount. Therefore, voided checks, there should be no additional checks written from that account that aren't run through the same process where money is transferred. It adds an extra level of internal control on that account. And any voided check should be taken into account when including transfers into that account. This limits the amount of liability of any fraudulent checks being written, anything being paid that isn't supposed to be paid, that type of thing. We also mentioned in a few comments that due to a change in staff, there were a few items that weren't complete when we did our audit. For example, accounts payable, fixed assets. This is entirely due to a change in staff. There was a finance personnel that left previous to the audit. A new one was hired, and it was taking her time to get familiarized with the accounting software as well as everything that needs to be done. But I don't see that as a problem going forward with a consistency in staff. We also mentioned on page 2 of that memo a centralization of the finance function. It's common in most of our governments to have things go back into one function or a more centralization. For example, we currently have every division outside, or most divisions outside of the government office building have their own finance staff or have their own accountant. This can cause for sometimes a lapse in or a difference in internal control where each accountant will have their own way of doing things or different internal controls. We like to see more consistency. More consistency gives a better understanding of each control as well as making sure a little bit more protection for the county. Does anybody have any other questions regarding the memo or anything I didn't go over?
I don't think so.
I also wanted to touch on the management letter, which was in the auditor's communications within, in the packet that we provided. We mentioned.
Now,
Sorry.
I believe you'll be on, I think that's page 79 on your PDF file.
Cover page says Auditor's Communications, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's, I don't know what it is.
Was it December 20th, 2016? Is that
Correct.
what it is?
That's it. Yep.
Does everyone have that?
It's also the smaller copy within the bound copies that you received.
Okay.
Very good.
Within the management letter, a couple things that I wanted to clarify. The first is the time clock. We also referenced that in our agreed upon procedures report, and I'll go over that to depth with the agreed upon procedures report. Our personal action notice recommendation. I wanted to clarify our recommendation is to remove electronic signatures from the physical pans. So these personal action notices are printed, and they were printed with electronic signatures on that. Just for the protection of management, protection of the council, we recommended that those electronic signatures be removed and either a real signature or a sign-off within the system be used. And I believe that is already implemented by management. They're already removed all those signatures. We also referenced some of the new accounting principles coming forward. One of these are the tax abatements. This is where the county will need to reference any abatements within their footnotes to detail, including names as well as amounts.
Could we jump back up to accrued compensated absences?
Yep.
Is that suggesting like a use it or lose it type policy, or what exactly are you suggesting there?
We don't see too many use it or lose it policies within our governments.
Right.
The county does have a cap on how much can be accrued. We normally see a little bit more encouragement on taking time. For example, holiday time or comp time, a lot of governments will require that it be used within so long, or similar to a use it to lose it. But for example, vacation or sick or more vacation be encouraged to be used.
So it would be management's responsibility to remind their employees where they are?
Some governments will do a payout if they,
And that liability amounts is growing substantially. It's up to about 3.8 million, I think was the balance at the end of the year. And that's countywide.
Right.
Take a look at all employees. And some were pretty substantial as far as
Is that
amount
something
of
where
time.
the department head's responsible for that, or would HR be responsible to let the department head know where the particular employee is in that regard?
it could be done through either manner. It really is, it really depends. We see, a lot of it being within, I see a lot of it with being within the department to encourage people to take time off. It does, reduce risks from our standpoint. And this is also a reflection of the fact that the number of employees in the county have grown. So with a growing number of employees, you're gonna see an increase in certain liabilities, as well as people aren't retiring till a little bit later. So at retirement, you'll see a lot of large payouts, reducing the liability.
Is that something that should be listed as a liability when we do our budget in the columns, so, per department?
There is a short-term portion, which will then, it should be reflected in the budget. The short-term portion is done based upon a calculation of the rolling average of what people take over 3 or 5 years. So it's an estimate within the statements, but I typically see see governments budget for a change in accrued compensated absences.
Certainly, I think it's gonna be used within the next year, I would think you'd want to budget for, anticipate to be used, yeah.
Are we doing that now? Is that being done now? John?
I don't know, really.
And here you
I say, is that being done now? Is that reflected in our, is
go.
that being
I don't believe
reflected
it
in our
is.
budget
I
now?
don't think it is, John.
What'll be paid out, say, to a retiring employee per department, especially for the next year? Is that reflected in?
It should be a part of the budget. If we know someone's retiring, we definitely should put it in the budget.
If we're aware of it, Joe, it would be budgeted. Sometimes we don't know that someone's gonna leave
But we do know
employment.
what the liabilities are in it.
Yeah, I mean,
Per
there's a
department.
Well, the
calculation by
liability is
person.
balance sheet. You wouldn't be
Okay.
budgeting that in your
Right,
operating
okay.
budget.
You wouldn't anticipate using the 3.8 million next year.
So
That's
we
just
wouldn't have
over
a big,
period of time.
if you have a small department
Sure.
with a big surprise, that'll upset the
Absolutely.
other part. Okay.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood that you were asking about the liability. I'm sorry. But yeah, like Mr. Strasburg said, it is tough to budget for a surprise retirement.
Right.
And especially at the timing of the budget. Our solution to the tax abatements, what we're seeing a lot is that management consider including information in the management discussion and analysis about any tax abatements that would be then presented in the footnote, not within the footnote itself. The management discussion and analysis is a better place to include maybe reasoning or potential benefits that are received from an abatement. Overall, I wanted to mention that we did increase our testing in the related areas due to the change of personnel. I know we've mentioned this a few times, and we mentioned it a few times within the management letter. Just that because of any changes, we made sure to increase our risk assessment as well as test more. Also within the brief book is included is our agreed upon procedures report. This was also included in the information
Looks like
from.
page 83.
Yep.
Your PDF file.
Page 83. We included this as part of additional procedures that we performed in order to calculate the liability due to time clock rounding.
Did you go back up to the time clock rounding?
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
but I wanted to include that with the agreed upon procedures report, which is on page 83.
Okay, now before you get to that,
Yep.
the roads inventory.
Of course.
Was it roads, Steve, that we did that we found a huge success in the inventory through your
Yes, we did. We had a problem several years ago, and former employees in Roads Division cleaned it all up, took inventory. I understand now we're actually implementing a new system for inventory throughout the county that's going to be consistent, and Roads Division will be part of that too. It's also my understanding that the work that we did can be rolled electronically into the new system. So,
Okay.
well, I'm looking at that.
Good, okay.
Sorry. There's so many documents. Any other questions on the management letter? I'm sorry if I skipped over anybody's questions.
Or we can address them at the end.
Yeah. The agreed upon procedures report, I wanted to go over the time clock. There was a question as to what improper rounding would be. I think it's better for a lawyer to answer all the SLA provisions as well. I'm not an attorney, so all that language isn't good for me. However, what we noted was that the time clock system was rounding work hours to a specific set of hours. For example, 8 to 5, 7:30 to 4:30, et cetera. And then certain employees would clock in, let's say 7:05, but the time was being rounded to 8 o'clock. Just a time clock implementation. This happens with new systems. We see it all the time where a new system's implemented, and there's a learning phase. There's time that it takes to figure things out. The effect of this is that there was just some employees with some time that needed to be accrued on their compensation or compensated time.
Doesn't it also occur that if someone decides to come in early all the time, you got a great worker, he wants to come in and 15 minutes early every day, the next thing you know, you're situated where you have to give compensation or overtime, is that right?
Yes.
So that was the reason for the rounding?
Yeah, I mean, you could even have people working from home in today's environment where they can dial into the system. So it's a complicated area as far as time tracking and keeping track when somebody's actually working.
And like Mike mentioned, it's the actually working part, not just the clocking in, getting the coffee, chatting with your neighbor, et cetera. And that was the substantiation of the letters that were signed by certain employees to say, no, we clocked in because we were downstairs, went upstairs, had coffee, et cetera, and then didn't actually work until 8. We see it quite often in our business where people come in, they sit and have coffee, but it's just the key to having them actually clock in to work when they're actually working.
Well, wouldn't the clock in sort of prove that they were coming to work on time? But there was still the understanding between management and the employee that their job started at 8 o'clock? Or is that not good with the FLSA?
I think the problem that we had with it was the documentation, is if an employee came back and said, well, I clocked in at 7:30, I was working, it's hard to remember a year ago and say, no, you were having coffee, or whatnot. So we wanted to limit the liability on the county and say that we don't want an employee to be able to come back and say, I was working when they actually weren't.
Makes sense.
That was also immediately rectified subsequent to talking about it.
Good.
The other items that I included in your brief book, I'm not going to go over in extreme detail, but those are our adjusting journal entries, our reclassifying journal entries, as well as our government-wide journal entries. The adjusting journal entries may seem to be out of number order a bit, but that's because of our system. When we look at journal entries, we look at them as a whole, including all journal entries to get the financials to the presentation form, and our system numbers them in that fashion. So I included all journal entries to show there are none missing. It just, the number order can be a little confusing. As noted in our memo to management, we believe the closing process, although showing vast improvement, could be continued to be improved. This is indicated in the number of our PBC entries or prepared by client entries when the books are closed. A lot of these entries can't be avoided. They're going to happen. This happens because of different departments submitting in information, other items that have to wait on another item to be complete. It does take time. We believe that we and the finance department, as well as management, have come up with a good plan to vastly reduce these entries and close the book sooner. I think we have a really good plan going forward, including a possible later start date of the audit, more communication with outside departments, and strict deadlines on when they need to have stuff done, as well as consistent staff. Consistent staff is key with any financial process and ensuring that everything is complete. Although I think we have seen a vast improvement.
Yeah,
I believe
this year was much better than in the past.
I believe one year we had over 200 journal entries, and now we're down to 113 total. I mean, just a great improvement in the past year. The reclassifying entries and government-wide entries, I wanted to kind of point out what those were. Reclassifying entries are entries the county doesn't need to post. We only provide the county with the adjusting journal entries because those are the ones that need to be posted to the county's books. And the government-wide journal entries are entries just to convert from the general fund to the government-wide. And these are all entries that we agree to post as part of our engagement. So no, not a representation of management or the finance department. Does anybody have any questions, or did I skip through anything?
Any questions? I think that, Laura, I think that you had reviewed some of this, and we certainly would be open to any of your questions that you might have, or Mr. Roser,
If I missed
if there's any.
I would just add two things, if I may.
Certainly.
I thought that Ashley did a very good job in presenting some of the answers to these questions I think council needs to know. The two things, Mr. Strasburg is quite correct that OPEB is a balance sheet matter, and they're also correct that it's a very, very difficult thing to try and budget from period to period. However, that does not mean that council shouldn't or could not look at that on an aggregate basis ongoing as a balance sheet matter, and we can have some discussion about that sometime if you'd like to.
Mr. Roser, would it be something that maybe could be in the message, the budget message? Possibly, or I don't know if you could really expound on it in the budget message.
Our intent has been really to build the OPEB trust fund up to a point where our OPEB liability is 100% funded.
Right.
So we have been funding that trust at a higher rate, if you will, than ARC. Each year when we go to Wall Street, the analysts at the credit rating agencies tell us every year, you're one of the only counties we see who aren't paying for OPEB out of current revenue. So we're really trying to build that trust up to 100% of the liability. Now, bear in mind that even once you do that, you're still subject to the vagaries of investments, as we saw with the pension plan this past year. But we believe that it would be appropriate for the government to have both the pension plan and the OPEB liability fully funded. And then if you're managing your investments as astutely as you can, that's a very, very good place to be for those who come behind us, because then they don't have to be concerned about an external bogey, if you will. They can focus on current business, if you will. So we're still striving to do that. I think before the stock market went down, now it's back up, I think we were somewhere in the 40s, and we figured that by, I think, John, 2028, that we could have OPEB fully funded. I'd have to go back and look at that arc to see if we're still on that trajectory.
Okay. And
But that's where we'd like to be.
We had to reduce some of the contributions during the recessionary.
We did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but we're now
Yeah,
getting
we did.
back on pace.
Oh, yeah, we're
Great.
back on, and we tried to make up for what we had not funded during the recession.
Right.
Yeah, I will say, also mention that there are some new
Thank you, Wayne.
accounting and auditing standards coming out related to OPEB that's going to require more disclosures than what you see now. It'll be very similar to pensions, probably be, 10, 15 pages just on OPEB. So there'll be more information probably than you want in the financial statements going forward. But that, I don't know if that kicks in next year or the year after, but it's coming up. It's been passed. It's just a matter of when it gets implemented.
Okay.
So,
And,
that's all.
and one other thing, if I
Yes,
may,
Mr. Rogers.
the tax abatements, the accounting standards are requiring that the financial statements contain a calculation of the dollar effect of tax abatements. And I actually had a chance at a seminar to have a conversation with a member of the Accounting Standards Board about this. It's a one-sided, to me, it's a one-sided equation. If you look at for example, the idea of trying to get rid of a tax in order to generate activity, in order to generate revenue. What the statements are going to show is the elimination of the tax. It's not going to address in any shape or form the benefit, if any, that was derived in getting rid of that tax. For instance, the fees that we charge the builders for the impact. If we remove that in order to generate more revenue, the more revenue generated side of the equation doesn't appear anywhere on the financial statements. It's not required. And as I said, I had a conversation with a member of the board about it. Didn't get a good answer. He was very sympathetic, but that's something that we may have to deal with going forward. If people are looking at our financial statements and seeing this abatement, and we need to understand what it is and how to explain it. And those are two things I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, I think as Ashley mentioned on that the discussion on that can't be in the footnotes under the financial statements, but could be added to the management's discussion and analysis where you're talking about the benefit of this particular tax abatement. So it could be kind of in your report, but not in the financial statements themselves, but it would probably be in the MD&A section if you wanted to expand upon that.
Yeah, I like that. Good job.
But down in the end, the overall picture, Steve, I know we're reducing our inventory tax and the other, the impact fee. But in the end, when you look at the benefits to the county at the end, say of a year or 2 years from now, you can say that, the county's doing better on the books, and you can relay back to those points, right?
Exactly, and you need to be able to do that.
Yeah.
That's
And sometimes there's not a real direct correlation one way or the other. There really isn't. The economy got better.
Maybe a stretch, yes.
Yeah. Did you have any, Mrs. Hurley?
No, Ashley covered the questions I had.
Great.
Yes.
Councilman Gilman?
I had a couple questions, and maybe you or some of the other folks may answer it. I noticed, it said that spending was down $1.2 million from, FY16 to FY15. But that mainly seemed to be the roads was down about $1.68 million. And it noted there were some issues there. Do you know those issues, or Weston? I'm just curious as to why roads spending was down so much below, year to year.
In reference to contract, I believe.
Yeah, just remember the details.
Yeah, well, one of I guess with roads, there's two main things going on. One is whether or not, and I'm not sure the specifics if it's regarding state aid, whether or not we got money from the state, because we don't always get, it's not highway user revenue. There's a separate account that builds up over time. The other issue when you get into the $1 million range as well is regarding fuel and how the county handles the fuel transactions. Historically, there was a separate, I want to say GL account that held the fuel for all county users, and that got transferred into the roads budget. So instead of just having, say, $300,000 for fuel just for the roads division of Public Works, it had the full $2 or $3 million for all fuel users throughout the county. So I don't know the specifics, but typically it's either regarding whether or not we utilize state aid money or if it's tied to how the fuel is being budgeted, because there was a change this current fiscal year in how fuel was being handled.
All right, well, yeah, I mean, because the report, it says there's a contract issue with the contractor meeting deadlines.
Yeah, that would be, yeah, we had issues with the paving contractor and we rolled over, we ended up getting all the work done, but it wasn't on schedule at all. I believe it went two or 3 months beyond, outside the fiscal year. We've since rebid the contract and have a more, responsive and responsible bidder.
And the other question I had, and again, I don't know if this is for PKS or for someone else, on page 125, it talked about the share of building expenses for City of Salisbury in charge of services was, it was 236 was the budget. We only got 133 essentially. I mean, I was just wondering about why we only got half of what we were supposed to get for share of building expenses from the city. I mean, if that, again, it's page 125 of this one here. So, and again, that's probably not, I mean, a PKS issue, but it just kind of looked at it.
If Wayne happens to know.
I'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
I think I know what the issue is there,
It's probably best to make sure.
but I would like to be sure before I answer you.
All right, thank you. All right. Everything else, I had questions on the answer, so good.
Thank you.
Any questions, comments? All right. We appreciate you taking the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you guys seeing us back.
Next item on the agenda for open work session is the Economic Scholarship Program. Mr. Brian Newton.
Good morning, Mr. President, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to update you on the Wicomico Economic Impact Scholarship Program. There's a copy of the presentation I'm going to share with you making its way down the table here. Just for review, it's been a while. If you'll recall, the program was approved by you on June 21st of last year, and that gave us a little time to get applications in. We had an application due date of July 29th, so just a little bit over a month. And if you'll recall, the eligibility criteria for this program is that they have to be a Wicomico County resident for 2 years. It includes public, private, and homeschool graduates. You did put the income cap into the program, and so the average household income of $75,000 or less applies to these students. They have to complete all the application processes that we require. They have to register for 12 or more credits, and they are required to attend an orientation, which was a little bit difficult last year as we were in a hurry to get the program started, but we did get everybody to some form of orientation before we started the program. Just some initial challenges, just so you know what we've experienced in the lead up and in the first semester. Obviously, the very brief time period, we have a lot more time going into this next year as we attempt to recruit students and get them ready. Many students by that time in June of 2016 had already made their college or employment plans for the fall. They had accepted into another college or they'd accepted a work schedule, so we were dealing with that as well. We didn't have the time to prepare students like we would like in terms of their placement tests and those type of things, determining where they're going to test into in terms of classes. We had applicants and interested students that we had to deny due to the income cap, and we believe that's an ongoing challenge. And we had, because the amount of the students who are in the program are below the $75,000 threshold, those students traditionally, and the research shows that those students generally tend to persist from semester to semester at a lower rate than other students, but we'll get the outcomes here in just a moment.
What do you mean they tend to persist?
They tend to fall off students who are below the $75,000 income threshold. Lower income students in general tend to have a lot of other difficulties in life. They have a history of academic challenges, maybe that higher income students don't. They often have to work, sometimes one and other jobs. Tend to have other issues within the family and those type of ongoing issues that impact their academic performance. And so if you take a look at students who are lower income versus students that come from higher income levels, students at higher income levels tend to persist from semester to semester at greater rates.
So you're seeing a higher dropout rate with families at that?
We do traditionally. Now we've had you'll see some success comparatively in this program compared to others, which I'll show you. But just kind of
It may be premature
Sure.
at this stage, but just would it be necessary maybe for, as part of the requirements, that we increase the grade point average so that we know we're getting a higher quality student that is concerned, because it's taxpayers' dollars.
Right.
And we don't want to frivolously throw it away if we're having students that don't really have a concern. And I think the only way to maybe predict that might be to increase the requirement as far as their academic.
Because you'll see a large number of the students in the program are continuing on to the next semester, have registered for the spring semester, have completed requirements for the fall semester. The 2.0 limitation certainly will have an impact on students who come from those lower income levels that do need funds to pay for their tuition and fees. Those students may not have succeeded at as great a rate as other students, and so you do have to take that into consideration as you look at an entering GPA. As you look at these type of programs throughout the country, there certainly are programs that have an entering GPA. You had decided in this first iteration that there wasn't going to be an entering GPA. There is a maintenance GPA, which, as you'll see, is impacting the number of students that can continue on. So.
Is there a way, because the whole idea of this is to track it, and should we maybe not look at the students that are falling out of the program and to get some idea of what their grade point average is going in and coming out, and if you see that 90% of the 2.0s aren't cutting it, then we recognize that that may be something we need to review.
We can certainly look at that data, absolutely.
Okay.
Back to June of 2016, there were 131, and you'll hear me refer to this in shorthand as WICE, and you'll see it in the data, in the presentation as WICE. That just tends to be what we refer to it around the office as we work with these students. But there were 131 students received into the program. Additional students we know of anecdotally chose not to apply when they heard there was the $75,000 income cap. But there were also students that chose not to apply beyond this 131 because of the full-time requirement, remembering that in order to maintain in the program, you have to maintain 12 credits and 2.0 GPA. 72% of our students at Warwick are part-time students, and so requiring a full-time schedule certainly is a limitation, not suggesting that it's a negative limitation, but when some students learned about that outside of these 131 applications, they decided that the program wasn't for them. There were 118 that completed all the application requirements, and so those three things would be a college application, a Wicomico Economic Impact Scholarship application, and the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA. They had to do that because, remember, this is a last dollar funding program. We take all the federal funds, we take state funds, we take any scholarships, and then any remaining that's left for those who are eligible, that is when we apply the Economic Impact Scholarship funds. So given that, there were 118 completed applications. Some of those were bumped out due to the income requirement. Some decided between the time they completed the application and the time school started they didn't want to continue. But at the beginning of the semester in the fall, there were 91 that started with us. Now, we track attendance for our students, and if they don't show up to classes, and there's a report at the 20% period, which is about 3 weeks in, we drop them out. There were 7 students that ended up on the no-show report and were dropped out of the program. Those are not students that you were billed for. Those are students that are taken completely out of their program because they decided not to attend class in those first 3 weeks. And so you had 84 students who remained eligible for the program, 21% in. Now, all 84 did not access Wicomico Economic Impact Scholarship funds, as I'll show you.
After the 3 weeks, do you monitor it then?
We do monitor it, faculty members monitor, and when a student withdraws from their courses, we are required to give an attendance date at the time that they withdrew. That's part of the financial aid regulations for students who are on financial aid. So the faculty member will give us that date of their last date of attendance in class.
So there's no reimbursement structure in here for the people that drop out, that the money's already been used for?
After the 20% period, after the 20% period, those students would be considered to be officially part of the program and would be billed to you, regardless of whether at that point they stop attending or not. So there is, we've taken that 20% snapshot because we do that with all of our students. If they don't show during those first essentially 3 weeks of the semester, then they are considered to be taken out of their classes.
So do we have a number on that after the 3 weeks?
I can show you, we have a number, 67 of the 84 completed some of their college credits in this program, and I got a slide here later on to kind of we'll maybe clear some of that up. Just briefly, and I'll just get through this quickly here, just so you know who was in the program. In terms of race, 53% of the students, 45 students were white, 32 African American, 4 Hispanic and Latino, and 3 Native American. The gender of the students, 63% female and 37% male. That tends to mirror our population as a whole at Warwick and at colleges throughout the country. There are far more females attending college than males at this point. In terms of where they came from, not surprisingly, the larger amounts came from the larger high schools in the county. In terms of Parkside, Bennett, Y-High, those were the large amounts. Also remember that in addition to high school students in this program, the program allows a student who has completed their GED within 1 year's period of time to access this program. We had 6 of those students who were GED students as part of this first cohort. Again, we required orientation, we required academic advising, and all these things are things that we're requiring that are not required of the rest of our student population. They're required to do academic advising in their first semester, but after that they can go online and they can register themselves. For this program, we require them to come in, see somebody, talk with somebody. We require them to go to that orientation. If they're going to drop a course, they have to do that through their student services advisor. We have asked students to participate in bi-weekly meetings with their economic impact coach. We took our student services positions and kind of added that duty to those positions. Not all students certainly have met that bi-weekly meeting ask that we've made of them, but the vast majority of our students have met bi-weekly with their WISE coaches. And we've also asked for progress reports from faculty from the courses that these students are attending.
On the coaches thing,
Yeah.
I mean, I know that some of these other programs around the country have kind of a mandatory thing where you have a coach or some sort of assistance to ensure, to basically try to increase the probability of graduation.
Right.
Is that what you're aiming for, or what does it mean, meet with coaches? I mean,
We ideally want them to meet every other week with somebody so we can monitor their status, talk about things that are happening in their lives that may be a negative impact to the continuation of their education. address any difficulties that they might be having. Some students require personal counseling, some students require, additional help in terms of additional financial assistance and where maybe to get that financial assistance, whatever it might be. Ideally, and you're seeing that with some of the programs around the country, you would have somebody who was a staff member who was coordinating the program and somebody that the students would come to who they knew, we're doing this on shoestring here, and so we're kind of taking our financial aid staff and our student services staff and saying to them, we've divided up the 84 and said, hey, you've got these 10, you've got these 10. Check in with these folks every 2 weeks and try to get them to your office. But, this works both ways. I mean, the student has to respond. The student has to come to us. It's not a situation where, there is some option in essence for the student to say, well, I'm not going to attend that coaching session. But for the most part, students have been willing to engage with their coach, and they found the coaches to be very helpful as they've worked through the semester. But remembering that, this is, other duties is assigned for the folks that are doing this. So they're not spending tons of time with these students as a full-time staff member who is specifically dedicated to the program would.
I have a question. On the first semester results, the fourth bullet point down says 43 of the 84 students completed both 12 credits and maintained a 2.0 average. But then further on the next major bullet point, it says 15 of the 25 WEIS funded students completed. What's the difference between those two bullet points?
We're treating the entire cohort, the 84, we're treating them the same in terms of the implementation and what we're doing with these students, even though not all 84 won't receive funds from the county, because remember, we're taking the last dollar funding and applying it first. So out of the 84, there were only 25 students this semester that accessed Wicomico Economic Impact Scholarship funds. And out of that 25, there were only 8 who had their entire tuition and fees paid for by the Wicomico Economic Impact funds. Remembering that the cap, with Pell covering a large part of the need of students who come from lower economic backgrounds, lower economic households, Pell and state, and in some cases scholarship monies covered a large portion of the 84 students. And so as we're looking at these students, we're looking at the entire cohort, and then for you also looking at these students in terms of the ones that did receive any county dollars.
So the 84 students isn't the number of students who benefited from the scholarship program. That number was only 15?
Well, the number that directly benefited from the program, in terms of, if you just look at the benefit as a dollar benefit, was 25. 15 of those 25 completed the 12 credits and maintained a 2.0 GPA as we take the snapshot here at the end of the semester. But we're treating all 84 as being part of this program, because even though they may not be receiving county dollars this semester, if they're certain, and let's just say that they completed next semester and we're going into a new academic year, they fill out a new FAFSA, and suddenly, maybe their parents' income went up, they would still be eligible to access the Wicomico Economic Impact Scholarship funds in the next year, assuming that they had maintained the 24 credits and they had completed with a 2.0. So that's why it's important to have them enrolled in the program, because we want them to meet the requirements so that at any point during their time while they're pursuing their degree, they could come back and access those funds if they hadn't previously. But in only 25 of those circumstances was there a dollar given from this program. And that really is the effect of the cap. I mean, to be frank, it's because of the $75,000 cap, most students who fall below a $75,000 household income are going to be taken care of through Pell dollars, but not all. Because remember that the $75,000 is, we're taking that from the free application for federal student aid And there are other factors that go into what a student's need ends up being in terms of how many students were in college at the time, what assets their family has, and those type of things. So.
Joe?
Have you found, due to the fact that this program is here, that more students may be taking advantage of some of the other grants, looking into it?
Well, yeah, they don't have a choice, and so.
I know they don't have a choice, but
Yeah.
I mean, are they finding them easier, or are they using them?
I don't know that they're finding them any easier, because that's a process that really happens within our financial aid office. So they're gonna fill out the application for us, and then we're attempting to, then we go through a process of finding what they're eligible for, whether they're eligible for Pell, whether they're eligible for state funds. But certainly, you know, all those things are being applied to minimize the impact to the county. In fact, we thought we had 10 students who were going to be fully funded through through this program. And, you know, midway through the semester, both of them received a scholarship. And so those scholarship dollars were then deducted, so those amounts were not billed to the county. So, but yes, we go through a process with them, even in the recruitment process, to let folks know what the opportunities are in terms of financial assistance, whether that be federal, state, or scholarship dollars. And there's all sorts of scholarships that certain groups of students may be eligible for, and we make sure that they apply for those.
Do you have a question, Mary?
Yeah, I was looking at the 2.96, the average GPA. At that GPA and even lower, and how many of those students will be able to transfer, like Salisbury University, with that GPA?
They can transfer eligible credits. You know, they can transfer even a grade of a D. It can be transferred. So,
Right, I
but
understand that,
certainly,
but will they be accepted into the college?
yeah, you know, generally, you know, each school is different in terms of their application requirements, and they take into a lot of factors other than GPA. But certainly, as you get toward a 3-point GPA, you're going to be much more likely to be accepted to a 4-year than you are for those who fall closer to the 2 or below. So, but there's a lot of factors from SU to College Park to Towson. They all take into consideration different factors, and also, of course, the ACT and SAT are part of those considerations.
Hopefully
as well.
they'll complete our program.
You know, I think the biggest the biggest number for me in terms of these students has been that 72 of the 84 have registered for the spring semester, and 67 of the 84 completed some college credits. You know, that 85.7 number is higher than our 70% persistence rate from semester to semester. In terms of our total population, about 70% of them persist from the fall to the spring semester. If you're looking at 85.7 are going to persist, that is a very good number. And actually, the real number in terms of success is 75 of the 84 students, because 3 of those students have already transferred to a 4-year institution. In fact, one of those students, because of their dual enrollment credits and the credits they were able to take in this first semester of this program, is graduated from Warwick in their very first semester of college. So if you really kind of look at it as 74, the 84 being successful, that's a good number. The number, of course, that we'd like to see that we would like for it to be better is the number that completed both the 12 credits and maintained the 2.0 GPA. But back to your question, Mr. President, about who's eligible for the program and who remains in the program. This really is the number that says, you know, this is not just a program where people are going to continue to go to college. They have to succeed. They have to pass that 2.0 barrier. They have to get 12 credits or more, and if not, you know, they will not be funded in this next semester. So I think, you know, there is that initial, because we're looking at it this semester by semester to determine if they're successful or not. So 51.2%, 43 of the students will be eligible for this program continuing on in the spring. But as I said, the vast majority are maintaining their college enrollment. They just won't be part of this program because they're not meeting these requirements.
Mark, any question?
Yeah, and how does that compare? I mean, because you can't really compare it to the full overall student body. I mean, so how does that compare to, let's say, last year when you had graduating class come in, without this program. And, I mean, that would be the more comparable because they are kind of,
Yeah.
more full-time graduating seniors, not returning students part-time.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at all Wicomico students for the year. We can certainly get to the number, but if you do look, I believe it was, there's a slide coming up here. A comparison slide, and it might be, the next slide.
Yeah, the next slide.
We did take a look at all Wicomico students for this fall to see how they did, whether they were in the program or not, that were taking classes full-time. And so there are 137 students, regardless of whether they're in this program or not, that graduated from high school in 2016 or had just completed their GED and attended Warwick full-time in the fall. For all the students, all 137 of them, 46.7% completed with a 2.0 and completed 12 or more credits compared to the 51.2% for just the cohort that's part of this Economic Impact Scholarship Program. For those that we had a FAFSA on and could determine their income, we looked at that group separately of those who weren't in the program. There were some people that, even though they could have been eligible for the program, decided not to apply, but yet they ended up being full-time. And of those students who weren't in the program, their success rate was 39.6% compared to the 51.2% rate. We also looked, and it's a much smaller group of the students who are not in the program and who didn't have a FAFSA on file. They paid out of pocket in some form or another. That group succeeded at a higher rate. Again, not surprisingly, coming from higher income backgrounds, we would theorize that those students, are more likely and more ready for success from the very beginning, and those students had a 63.6% success rate compared to the 51.2 for the cohort. But it's an interesting question to go back and look at last year and how the full-time students did as a whole. We can certainly do that comparatively. Do know in terms of persistence from semester to semester, our number, I believe, is 69.7%. And so the fact, and persistence being they re-enrolled in the next semester, given that there are over 80% that have re-enrolled, that certainly is a success compared to the total population of all students from all our counties being closer to that 70%. And then, our retention rate is then, and our retention rate being started in one fall and then continued in another, being closer to in the 50s. We'll have to see what our retention rate looks like next fall, and whether these students come back to us in the fall. But remember, community college students tend to come in and out. One of the requirements of this program is to keep them going forward, that they have to do the 12 and they have to do the 2. So we want them to get done quickly and get that degree or certificate and get out into the workforce. That is not generally the definition of a community college student. As I said earlier, 72% are part-time of our total population. 60% of our students hold some type of employment. So they may come for a semester, then they take a semester off, and then they come for a semester after that. But that also tends to be more as students get older. They tend to do that. Here, remember that we're working primarily with students coming out of high school, even though we do have some older GED students who completed the GED within 1 year and were eligible for the program.
Now, did you track, was it college ready? Is that what the term is? When you graduate high school, there's a certain percentage that come in that aren't deemed college ready, I guess. Is that
right?
And did you track that for these students and the success rates?
We can get that number for you, and what you're getting at certainly in terms of whether they had to take developmental courses or be college ready. For the vast majority of our students, they end up taking one or more developmental courses. It's a high 70s number in terms of all students. In this program, the vast majority of students did have to take some sort of developmental course, at least one. And that has an impact on grade point average because the way our grade point average is calculated at Warwick, only classes that are college level courses get counted into GPA. So a student who succeeded in the developmental courses but didn't succeed in a college level course that didn't have a developmental requirement, it may have impacted their GPA to the point that they were not at the 2.0 level and able to continue with us for this next semester. So, yeah, it's again, I can get you the exact number in terms of the cohort and how many were in developmental. Looking at program cost, just so you know, in terms of the county's obligation in the program, as I said, 25 received some program funding, 59 qualified for full financial aid, whether that was Pell, state, scholarships, or other sources. And 8 of the 25 received full funding, meaning all of their tuition and fees were paid for by this program. So the expended amount for the fall was $25,154.75, about evenly split between the fully funded and the partially funded students. And looking forward, knowing that we have some students that haven't met the success requirements, the amount that we will spend in the spring will be less. It'll be about, right now, $13,284.93. That number changes throughout the semester based on scholarships that come in. If students end up dropping credits, those type of things, that number will change, but it's certainly not going to be as high as the fall number because of the lower amount of students in terms of going forward in the program.
It says that 8 of the 25 received full funding. Right. Were those 8 part of the 15?
Those 8 are part of the 15, that's correct. Okay. I'm sorry, they're part of the 25. Not all 8 completed the program successfully. I think it was 5, and there were 6 that were re-enrolled for the next semester in some form or fashion. So no, not all 8 completed the program successfully.
6 were re-enrolled?
I believe, yes, 6 have re-enrolled, that's correct.
So a question on that. So if your GPA drops below 2.0 and you re-enroll, you don't get paid for, but let's say your GPA comes back up the next semester, do you get back in the program?
Yeah, under the terms in the resolution, they have to have 24 completed and have maintained a 2.0 at the end of the academic year. So, for instance, a student that may have completed 11 credits but had a 2.0 GPA in the fall, they're not eligible for funding in the spring, but they could take 13 credits in the fall, paid out of their own pocket or paid in some form by financial aid. And then when we take the calculation this summer, if they have met that 24 and have maintained a 2.0, they would be eligible for funding in the next year. But in terms of the spring semester, because they didn't meet the requirements at the end of the fall, they won't be paid for with county dollars at that point. But they can work their way in. Now, I think we do have some students that will fall into that bucket that are close in terms of number of credits completed and their GPA was close. They can rectify that by maybe taking more in the fall, or we're more likely to counsel them to say, hey, just take your regular number of credits or maybe a few less in the fall and then come in the summer and try to make that up. Because if they weren't succeeding at 12 in the fall, to say come back and do 13 or 14 or whatever it is in the spring, that's a recipe for them not succeeding in the spring. And so maybe breaking it out over the course of the spring and the summer. But at the end of the summer, we will take the snapshot to determine who out of the folks who started with us have met the 24 and have met the 2.0 GPA. And remember also the other expense as part of the resolution was that students that had dual enrollment expenses that were paid out of pocket for them, not reimbursing them for dual enrollment funds that were paid by other sources, whether it be the school district or by Warwick or whomever, that those students could apply for the reimbursement on the cost of their dual enrollment if they completed the 24 and have a 2 at the end of the academic year. Right now, based on what we know about their dual enrollment history, that number could be as much as $5,300, but it's likely to be less than that because it's probably the case that not all those students have successfully completed the requirements here in the fall semester. So the total cost...
Well, on that, there was an issue with homeschooled taking, at least one homeschool student, maybe more, with that, whether they were kind of just dual enrolled or just taking credits. Can you
Sure.
explain what the?
We don't count students who are taking courses, let's just say they're 16 and they're taking courses. They're not considered to be dual enrolled under the definition of dual enrollment that the state provides us. And so they do take courses with us and do successfully complete those, but because they're not dual enrolled, they can't be reimbursed because we've said dual enrolled. Now, you certainly could change that and say that any students, any credits that a student took as a homeschool student would be reimbursed if they successfully completed in this program. I think that would be actually a good change to the program. But in terms of the law, they're not considered to be dual enrolled credits. So about $43,739 and 68 at the moment is the cost. I think, as we go forward, just kind of keeping the purpose of the program in mind, certainly as an economic impact program, what we walk away with after one semester is that at least 67 students have completed some college credits. And we know from national data that students that complete some college, even if they don't complete their credential, that they fare better economically, and they end up paying back to the community more in taxes. And so because they're earning at a higher rate than just students who have a high school diploma or a GED. And also what we don't know about this program yet, frankly, is because it was such a short period of time in the application process, one of the goals of this program is simply to encourage more students to attend college, even though they can attend college without any dollars from the county because they're going to qualify for full Pell. And the marketing message in terms of you can do this and it's not going to cost you anything versus come out and fill out the free application for federal student aid, and after you go through those 90-something questions will determine whether you're eligible or not. It's an easier sell to those students to get them to think about college. And so we don't know what that's going to look like because we had such a short period of time, but hopefully what we'll see for this academic year is that the number of students who are coming to us as a whole will be more than the previous year after we've had a chance to talk with them throughout the semester.
I've got a question. When your program purpose, is to become employed and contribute to Wicomico County's economic development. It's early in the program, and I realize this, but what do you have in place to track that these people are going to stay in Wicomico County and work in Wicomico County, the ones that take part in this program? Guarantee us that the money that we're spending, because I think anybody that knows college, people that go to college, it's nothing. I don't think it's as much to do as the opportunities here, is that people like to move away and get away from mom and dad at some point in time. So we need to know, and if this program continues, we need to know that these people are staying in Wicomico County and contributing. That's the purpose of the program. If they're not, we're educating folks that's going to be moving away. So what do you have in place to track that?
Yeah, it's a good question. We have career and alumni surveys that we use to track and to track whether a student has stayed in the county or not, what their employment is. We may need to expand that a little bit to get even more details about what their outcome was in terms of their employment. We also do receive data from the National Clearinghouse that tells us whether they've gone on to another college or not. So those students that have transferred, we don't lose track of them. We do know what schools they've transferred to and what their success rate was there. But as we more fully develop the application process, and we get closer to having students certainly graduate, we'll want to make sure that we have even more pieces in place to collect them in terms of where they ended up in terms of their employment, how much they ended up making, those type of things that they stayed in Wicomico County.
There's certainly no obligation for them to stay in the county, though.
There's no obligation for them to stay in the county. I'll say this, and it's just, this is just my opinion, but, I think students that are burdened with student debt tend to look where salaries are large for employment. And so I think even those students who may stay with this program and not actually receive an associate degree with us, if they've avoided a semester of tuition at a 4-year, and some of us know what that cost is. I mean, we're talking, $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 per year. If they've avoided some of that cost through this program, and that factors into their determination to stay here in Wicomico County versus going over to Baltimore or Washington or elsewhere, I think that's something else that you're going to have to keep an eye on, certainly.
You said a few minutes ago that students would have an opportunity to go to college even if this money wasn't there due to Pell Grants?
Well, what I'm saying is that even if you hadn't passed this program, Pell covers those lower income students. And so, that's why, we're in favor of expanding the number of students in terms of the cap, because we want those students that maybe have a harder time because they're in that gap between being what we consider maybe to be well off versus lower income, and that those are the students that truly struggle with college access because they can't afford it and Pell doesn't cover.
So are you saying that we need to expand it so we can include well-off students?
No, I'm not saying to include well-off students. I'm saying to include students and whatever that number is that you determine. But certainly we have students who have household incomes of more than $75,000 who are going to struggle with college costs for a variety of reasons. And I don't know what that number is. I don't think there is any magic number. You're hearing numbers across the country, 125,000, you're hearing, 150,000, you're hearing no in a cap at all. But I think what the program does do is it encourages, even those students who aren't going to get one county dollar from this program, it encourages the idea of college, and hopefully that will generate more students to apply for college, even though they could have without this program.
Larry?
Yeah, the criteria is registering for 12 credits a semester.
That's right.
And then we just got done discussing the dual enrollment reimbursement. And you go on to say that students that complete 24 hours, and you mentioned the summer class. So are we doing the 12 credits per semester or 24 for the total year?
It's 12, complete 12 and 2.0 to remain funded in the program. But for the entire year, there's a snapshot taken as outlined in the resolution of the 24 credits and 2.0. So they could have they could have completed 11 in the first semester and completed 13 in the second semester. The 13 wouldn't have been paid for into the program, but now it's the end of the academic year and they have 24 and their GPA cumulatively is 2.0. They would then be eligible for the program.
So the criteria is actually 24 credits at the end of the year.
It really is, yeah. And, under the resolution, we were required to give an annual report to you, and that report will really be able to tell us who succeeded and who didn't, and we're happy to come and update at this point in the program. But we chose September annually because by that time, we know whether they succeeded in the summer. We know all the financial aids closed out and those type of things, so we can give you a more accurate picture in September in a much more detailed written report in September of each year. But yes, we have students who are close to the 2.0 and that, if they picked up another class or two, they may make their way back into the program, so the success rate you're seeing may be higher. But we're also not going to, and I've told my folks that work in student services, we're not going to put somebody in a situation where they're not going to be able to succeed just because they need to maintain access to this program. I mean, that's unfair to the student. So if a student's telling us, look, I've got a full-time job, and we see that they didn't do well with 12 credits this past semester and they had a full-time job, we're not going to then say, take 13 or take 15 or whatever it is to make your way back into this program. We'll try to look for other sources of funding for them. And so, our goal is the success of these students, whether they're in this program or whether they're outside.
What's the typical semester cost for 12 credits?
12 credits, we're about 106 per credit hour right now, so about 1,200 and something when you take into consideration fees for a 12 credit semester.
Okay. The 25 fully funded came out to about $1,750 a student. That's some real rough math, but I guess my question would be, this next semester, or the spring semester, from reading this, should I assume that 15 students
That 15 students are,
follow through?
have completed the requirements to go through for the spring semester.
So we started out with 25,
And now we're down to 15.
and we have 15 who are going in the second semester.
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct. In terms of those students who are actually receiving county dollars.
Which is what we really are concerned about as far as what our obligations have been.
Absolutely, and we understand that, but we also know that in terms of the larger amount of students that are part of the program, as you're seeing, the success rate in terms of continuing with us is pretty high, so.
Well, kind of piggyback off what Joe was saying, you know, it's an economic impact program, that's what it was billed as. So how are we measuring its economic impact? I mean, you know, how are we going to know in 5 years whether or not it's had an impact? What process is
Yeah,
there to
I mean,
measure
I think
that?
we need to go through that process. I think Dr. Hoy had that conversation with you in the lead up to the vote on this program. You know, this is a program that you do have to look out 5 or 10 years, and I think, you know, certainly one of the success factors is going to be whether they graduated, certainly is one. 2, whether they ended up being employed, and whether they ended up being employed here in Wicomico County. I mean, those are all certainly things that we'll look at. I think there are other success factors that have to be generated and we have to look at long-term. We are tracking these students through our system so that we can break down the data in the long term. You know, right now we were, you know, in a hurry to get the program started and had to scramble, but we need to have that conversation with our institutional research area, with our president's staff, with vice presidents and presidents, and determine what those long-term factors are. But, you know, those are certainly 3 that you can be sure of.
But, I mean, there's nothing right now, though, to say, this is how it's, you know, without this program, you know, the economy would be this much less right now. I mean, there's no measurement.
Nothing like that at this point, no, because we're in such early stages of it that even anybody that, like I said, we have one graduate who is largely a graduate because of our dual enrollment program in the high school. You know, we can start, you know, she's actually going to go on to a 4-year, so she won't be out in the workforce yet, but she's somebody, certainly they'll be one of the first ones. Where does she's gonna end up graduating from us, where does she end up long-term in terms of her employment? We don't know the answer.
Dr. Hoy said 10 years before we could tell if it had any impact.
Any other questions? All right, Mr. Newton, appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the council priorities, and, excuse me? Yeah.
I hear you, Joe.
I'd like to know,
You know what Joe's priority is.
yeah.
He named it.
At a prior meeting, the council had said they would be interested in knowing what direction we were taking, you know, what issues we felt were of concern. So we've included in your brief book what we've been tracking as priority items, and I didn't know the purpose of this work session was to get a feel from the council on these particular items, or whether or not there were other additional items that members of the council would like to see added to this to the list.
These items, I think, are very worthwhile. I'm not sure they're the council's priorities. I think they're the administration's priorities. My intent on bringing this forward was find council priorities, Mr. President, and, you know, I think we can go through these and say, yes, these are things that need to be addressed, but there are more things that need to be addressed by the administration rather than by the council itself. I think we're much better served if we hear priorities from council members rather than priorities from the administration.
Well, these are county issues as much as they are administrative issues. But again, John, that's why we're meeting today, so that, you know, if you are suggesting that there's other initiatives you'd like to see the council taking, we want to add it to this list.
Well, again, you know, I think that these are administration priorities that are already on the books that are going to be looked at within the next period of time, except for maybe something like an animal committee or something along that day. But the rest of them, I think, to the to the letter are really items that are being looked at through administration, except the personnel manual update also, but the rest of them are. So if you're asking me what my priorities are, what I would like to see accomplished by the council, I'll be glad to share those with you, because I think that there are items that we have ignored or failed to address as a council itself, not necessarily administratively, but I think the administration should be part of these items. Is that what you're looking for?
Yes.
Okay. Well, and I hope that I don't make this my show, because I think that these are items that when I ran for office that I would like to see accomplished or have been brought to us by citizens who have voted in the community. And it's not the administrator's initiative to take on these types of projects, it's the council's to initiate these. And for instance, to give you a for instance, we addressed the poultry house issue as far as setbacks go and as far as operation goes, but we haven't addressed what the rest of the community and what the majority of the people that attended these sessions attended for, and that was for a health impact of the poultry industry on Wicomico County. Now, we know that the administration's not going to take this initiative, but should the county take an initiative? We have a large number of students that are concerned about these issues.
But John, I thought we talked that that's a state issue, the health
It
issue.
is, it is a state issue,
Yeah.
but if we don't forward it, then the state's not going to take that initiative to do that.
It's also a federal issue, because the Environmental Protection Agency, they
And again, if
oversee-
we don't forward it, nobody's going to take the initiative.
Leave that horse alone, John.
All right? So now we have an opinion. At least we have some dialogue, which in which case we had no dialogue at all. The other is, and it's, you have a comment that you'd like to make about that? Yeah. I wasn't talking to you, but that's okay.
That issue was raised in health impact analysis, and our local health department encouraged the state to take on an in-depth health impact study regarding air quality. So I think it's not accurate to say that the administration nor the county has taken that on. Our local health officer absolutely did take that on.
And I agree with you, but to say that the administration hadn't looked at it, I think if we don't forward it and keep it in front of the state, that they're not going to do anything. And that's my opinion.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so moving on.
Good. Go ahead, Jim.
And, you know, these are initiatives that I would like to see brought forward. If you have your own initiatives, or if you want to criticize our initiatives, then go ahead. However, we've noticed from different counties in the state now that solar fields are becoming an issue of where they're placed when they're placed on farm property. Now, should it be the administration's responsibility to look into this? Or should the council initiate looking into solar fields and the impact that they're going to have on farm property?
Well, the trouble with that is it's a farmer's property, not the council's property. And I mean, why would we want to restrict what farmers could do to their property?
Well, and that's open for discussion. These are just initiatives that they have in other counties to keep solar fields from being on good, high-quality farm property. Should we go ahead and look at this and address it? Or should we wait, like we did on the chicken houses, until it becomes a real issue?
Well, we had a 350-acre farm near me, tillable, high-quality farmland that was just bought by an environmental group to turn back into trees that we lost.
You've got one instance now.
It's an instance.
And so are we going to lose more, or, yeah?
Yeah.
So should we go ahead and look at it, or shall we wait till it becomes an issue and then look at it?
I mean, that could be something that planning and zoning, you know, if we wanted to ask the planning and zoning commission to look at and evaluate and make a recommendation, that may be a way to do that if we wanted to go down that road.
These are initiatives that we have to look at.
What else, John?
One of the things that we have, and that I think that the administration will look at, is raising the bid requirements over the $5,000 minimum. I think that if we take the initiative to do that, it would be much more in our interest rather than wait for the administration to do it. Why don't we do this?
Raise the bid requirements explain that a little
From
bit.
$5,000 to what they are now, up to a higher level. Why don't we take this initiative? You have something you want to say again?
Let's get them on the table, and what we'll do, John.
Sure, let's get 'em
we'll
on
put
the
'em out.
table.
We'll put them out, and I would want to send these to all the council members in a written form, as well as the executive branch,
Huh?
and ask for a response individually on what
Right.
each person feels is the pros and cons of those initiatives.
Well, exactly. These are my initiatives. I'm sure
Okay.
other council members have things that they'd like to accomplish within this.
Sure. So you're
term.
saying that you think that the $5,000 bid minimum should be raised?
No, I'm saying that it should be looked at and evaluated, and that if it is determined that it should be raised, then we should look at it. These are things that we need to look at, I think.
But you're not suggesting it be lowered?
I'm not suggesting anything. I'm suggesting we should look at it.
Okay.
And evaluate it. Our number two resource in the county is tourism, correct? Do you think there are any initiatives or ideas that could come from the county council to increase the amount of tourism that we have in Wicomico County? Which has the second largest impact in the county? Is there anything we're not doing that we should be doing? Is there any initiative that you'd like to see do?
Okay.
Something else that came up relatively recently is a bid preference for county contractors, where we find that county contractors lose bids by a very small amount. Should the contract be weighted? Should we go ahead and look at that? If we don't take that initiative, nobody's going to take that initiative.
Yeah,
Should we
that's-
weight it? There are counties that do weight bid contractors.
That's what we've briefly touched on that before, such as whether we should have a requirement of 10% local
Sure,
contractors.
we have briefly touched on
I know,
it.
it's very worthwhile reviewing that, I understand.
Is there a need for a county sewer system? Years ago,
Yes.
it was determined that we should have a county sewer system, and that it would be impacting us. Now, who's gonna take the initiative to look at that? Should we go ahead and set up an initiative, or have the administration look at these types of things? The other thing, some of our, pardon me?
You said you already did?
There we go. So these are things that we don't know yet, that maybe in order to get them on the table a little bit, that we should look at. Some of our enterprise departments, their funds might be, expenses might be a little high, and I think maybe we should look at some of our enterprise funds and see, evaluate their funding. So those are the items that I think would be interesting for the county to look at. And I'd like to see some of these looked at before my term expires.
Appreciate the input, John, that's what I'm looking for. Any other suggestions from any council members?
I don't know, I think it may be interesting to look at the speed camera law. I mean, right now, we're not, we don't have a contract for speed cameras, as I understand it, for the county. Obviously, the city's different. But, if we're not gonna have a contract, is there a, desire to keep the law on the books if we're not gonna use it? So, I think that's something maybe to explore too, so. I'll add one thing, so.
Okay, anyone else? All right, that's good, thank you. And as I said, we'll put these together, we'll put them in a questionnaire form, send them out to these to council members and get the pros and cons, and then we'll come back with a work session to review that.
Executive's office.
Yeah.
Like Wayne said, they were already looking at some of the things and
Yeah.
then we can respond.
Yeah, we're
Wait seemed to have some opinions on
We'll
something.
include them.
I think we have a good list here, and we can always add to it.
All right.
And I think we all should get together and discuss this.
Yeah, John may not agree with every element, but appreciate you moving forward.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda here. We're looking to entertain a motion to adjourn an open work session to go into closed session.
So moved.
Second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Open work session is adjourned.